conference materials once those get published. So, all right. To frame today's conversation, again, I guess I should introduce ourselves. Tracy, go ahead and give a quick introduction of what you do and where you're from.
Hi, greetings from Florida. I'm jealous that I'm not with you, as Boston has some of the greatest food in the world. I teach at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, primarily in the discipline of project management. I've been working with ePortfolios for about 6 years now, and what I'm going to share with you are some of Embry-Riddle's successes as well as some of the challenges that we've faced. Thank you, Jeff.
All right. So I'm Jeff Lee. I'm actually Director of Product Development at Foliotech. So I'm an ePortfolio provider, along with a number of the others, Tastrium, LiveText, BubblePad, Digication, that you have to choose from at your disposal for assessment and ePortfolio use. So kind of to frame our conversation today, we're going to be talking obviously about ePortfolios, but ePortfolios to me are broken down into three categories. We've got purpose. So you have to have some type of purpose for your ePortfolio. Why are you doing it? It could be as simple as I'm a student, I want to showcase and work to an employer. It could be as more complex as a capstone project, my senior project I have to put together to demonstrate I know these 5 different competencies. In conjunction with the purpose, you also have a process. So one of the values of ePortfolio is this process the student or the individual goes through in gathering material, curating their work, figuring out how to organize it, and then ultimately the product itself. How do I take that process that I just went through and showcase that somehow? I mean, it could be very rudimentary or it could be very ornate, into some type of presentation website to some degree. So those 3 things together, to me, make up the ePortfolio. Now I know at this conference there's been some discussion on the term ePortfolio in and of itself because there's some backlash in the community. Certain faculty members don't like ePortfolios, had experienced ePortfolios, so they think they're terrible, but they don't really have an understanding of the value. Maybe they had a bad experience with the technology or something, so they have a bad taste in their mind. But we're going to call it ePortfolio for today's topic. To kick things off with Tracy, Tracy's going to talk to us about the purpose. So Embry-Riddle is an aeronautical university in Florida, and it's actually worldwide. They have campuses all over the world. And she's with a project management discipline, and she will share with us quickly why they chose to use ePortfolios in their classroom. Go ahead, Tracy.
Thanks, Jeff. Do you have the 3 questions up, or if you could share your screen just for a second? So, of course, we're coming to you from a competency-based perspective. So, project management as a discipline, it can be looked at from an engineering perspective as systems or a business perspective of a mindset of how to get things done. So when developing a master's program for project management, and we contemplated what is a great capstone experience for our students, Embry-Riddle's traditional, which would have been a research paper or a typical thesis activity, it really didn't seem to fit what project managers might need to be able to showcase how they can do project management for the future. So what we explored some other options, and back this was probably as many as 8 years ago, and ePortfolio, at least in our circles, was very much in its infancy. But when we looked at the concept, a portfolio, a repository for a collection of artifacts that demonstrated student performance, the ePortfolio really became an obvious choice for our, again, project management capstone for our students to display all what they have done. So up on the screen, while those 3 questions are specifically toward project management, the reality is those questions don't have to be only project management related. You could, if depending on what discipline you're coming from, if you kind of just change out the words project management to fit your needs, those 3 questions are really kind of brilliant on if we would all proceed treating our classrooms with trying to get our students to take ownership and take active participation, well, I'm of the opinion that the students then have a much stronger experience through their educational journey. Okay, Jeff?
Thanks, Tracy. So in connection with ePortfolio and what they've decided to do at the Embry-Riddle campus, what we want to talk about is those two. I introduced purpose, process, and product. And we're going to focus on the process and the product. There is value to ePortfolios. We all recognize that. So what is the value in the process the student goes through, individual goes through, in putting together their portfolio? And what is the value in the actual product that is produced? Not by any particular tool, but the product that's produced by the individual that somebody might see. So that's my question to you, Tracy. When you're looking at the work you're doing in the project management discipline down there in Florida with Embry-Riddle, what value do you see in the process and the product for ePortfolio?
So the answer to that question could be that original 50 minutes that we thought we were going to have to share our experiences. But I kind of am going to pick up on a couple key ones. So within, our project management program, and I'm sure we all can relate to this, our students proceed through their educational journey kind of in stovepipes, where in the fall term they might have their collection of 2 or 3 3 or 4 classes that they're taking, and those classes, when the students attend, again, are very topical in nature, very stovepipe. So in my example, they take their foundations class. Then the next class they take is project management communications, and then the next class they take is one about the organization and its ability to execute projects. So the students through their journey look at project management through very detailed containers of how to do project management in industry. What part of this, the value of the process of the ePortfolio is at the end of the program, the students are expected to put together a collection. In our program, the collection exceeds about 120 artifacts of their mastery on how to do project management. So at the end of the program, the requirement of the creation of the ePortfolio, it causes them to go through their curriculum. So they actually do a full curriculum review and allows the student to recognize the integration of all those stovepipes nearer to the end of their degree. So those were actually 2 major points I wanted to share. One is that as a student goes through the process of collecting all the artifacts they've made over their 18 months to 3 years of going through grad school, so just that process of collecting and reviewing forces that student to do a complete holistic review of the curriculum that they've taken over those couple of years. And then as they're creating the ePortfolio, what students have often said is that they didn't fully understand the true integration of the discipline until they brought everything together at the end. And my comment normally back to them is it's really essentially a humongous puzzle. And it's impossible for the students to understand the intricacies and complications of that puzzle in a single class. That they have to go through, again, the 2 or 3 years of learning about how to do project management until they actually can see the full light bulb of integration come on. So that's the process part, the value, the full review of the curriculum and the understanding of the full integration of all of the stovepipes in the program. And then the product, what does the student create? So I'm sure that we all, since we're attending a conference on ePortfolios, we all fundamentally believe what it can create for the student. So from our students, well, I've not had many. I've had about 5 students who have taken their ePortfolios into industry, whether it be into a job within their own organization or when they go and get interviewed for another job within project management, that they've taken their ePortfolios and have completely changed how their interview proceeded. Because instead of just talking about how they know how to do project management, because all the artifacts are collected and organized in a way, it's a very simple way for the students really to show that they're very competent in doing project management activities. So that would be Jeff Embry-Riddle's kind of my experience working with Embry-Riddle, the value for both the process and the product.
So that gets us back to that topic then of the whole idea of this session. Does the value of the ePortfolio outweigh its complexities, right? Because like it or not, it's a complex thing to do. I keep hearing that over and over again. The sessions I attended sessions yesterday. It's a hard process to implement. So Tracy, can you talk to us a little bit about the complexities that you found at Embry-Riddle in the process and the product there?
So it's quite funny that, or not funny, I guess maybe ironic, that nearly all of these same activities that I touted as the value to the ePortfolio are going to be the ones that I also use as the complexity. So the value, which is that full understanding and integration of a student bringing together about 120 artifacts, often just the idea of that complexity will stymie students that they just don't know how to start that process. So we provide a framework. That framework is industry driven. What does industry expect project managers to do? So we provide them kind of, again, the framework on what types of artifacts that they essentially they created and collected through their classwork. And the students then have to, go and put together their inventory, evaluate their inventory, decide what artifact goes where based on the framework industry provides. And all of those things earlier I described as being the true power behind the ePortfolio. But that same activity often will paralyze students because initially it's kind of enormous. Now, sometimes I have to talk students off the bridge, which if we have time, or if we have time today to talk about how are we resolving activities, or you know what, Jeff, I'm probably going to talk a little bit about that now, that with the ePortfolio, that students really need a lot of coaching, where maybe even hand-holding to allow them to overcome the fear of the initial, again, the enormity of 120 artifacts, and then the selection, the upload, and then I often find that many students will create the infrastructure of their ePortfolio, but they won't share it with anybody because maybe they're fearful of putting themselves out there. And Jeff and I had a brief conversation earlier about which is kind of almost ironic in a state today where young people are so driven by social media. And younger people have such an affinity to put pictures and words and so Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all those other social media aspects where they're putting themselves out personally, but then when it comes time to putting themselves out professionally, many students are very fearful. They just don't want to share it. So all the value in that, developing this grand integrative ePortfolio is often so complex that students almost have to be prodded to actually start uploading it into the ePortfolio, and then the next step to actually share it with the instructor and share it with the peers of the class. So if that is one portion of the complexity, then the other portion of the complexity I'm going to say is buy-in from the students and the faculty that the ePortfolio is so strong and so powerful, but it takes a whole different way of thinking about how to get coursework done. It is generally more grand, and it takes that not only the technical aspect, but it takes that reflective aspect that we're all very familiar with. And it's a challenge for some students to start, and then equally the challenge of the faculty to actually want to learn how to do something that is such a departure from, creating an assignment, submitting it to Blackboard, grading it in Blackboard, and then moving on to the next assignment. Because as we know, the ePortfolio becomes much larger than single assignments, but the collection, and then the instructor having to have the ability to grade a collection and not just a single.
Those are good points. Yeah. I guess that because we don't have too much time, I think we do have another 4 minutes, Tracy, that we could talk about some of the plans that you have at Embry-Riddle to resolve some of that complexity. So, you know, when looking at process and product and the frustrations that those bring, it's funny, Tracy and I were joking earlier, I wanted to change that to complexity to problems, but she's like, well, problem's such a negative term. It's the cave term, you know, colleagues against virtually everything. So that's what they might say, it's a problem, but we want to view it as more as a complexities of the ePortfolio. Well, they need some resolutions regardless of what we term them, whether they're complexities or problems. So what resolutions are you considering for those components?
Okay, so I got quite a few to come at you. So to have the instructors, and now of course, much like many schools, we've got a small cadre of full-timers and then, of course, a very large adjunct faculty who administer our courses. So we required each faculty member to create their own ePortfolio so that the faculty can see that the actual creation is not difficult. The interface with the technology is not a difficult task. So there was one. How do we have all of our instructors be familiar enough so when a student said, oh my gosh, I can't do this, that the instructor can go back and say, well, if I can do it, I assure you, you can do it. We've started to use ePortfolios in different ways other than just the capstone. So giving the students an opportunity to work in Foliotech earlier in the program, to do projects where in the past those projects might have been flat papers. We're encouraging students to use Foliotech as a collaborative tool to bring together all kinds of student work for a final project in a course. We're ensuring that our videos that we're providing students for how do you get started, that those videos are, we use mostly the Foliotech videos, so a little accolade here. The videos are short, they're very purposeful, and they're very, very informative for the student. So for those who are kind of scared to actually begin. We've maybe gone a little bit over on the deep end for when the student has to collect all what they've done in their program. So 3 years worth of artifacts. Many students get stymied by that. I do think that we have gone overboard now on how to help students find all of their work. One of my colleagues created, he's calling it a treasure map. And while the idea of the treasure map for like the instructors is good, I kind of think that the treasure map might let too many, you know, it's almost like giving them the answers. And I also fear that this treasure map becomes then what the student goes and plugs in, where earlier I kind of talked about when the student has to go find all their inventory, look at the inventory, decide what artifact goes where. With this treasure map, I fear that in the interest of trying to help the students get going, because our terms are 9 weeks, what we might have done is now we give them a checklist instead of asking the students to do a review of all their work. For faculty, there's a couple of us who are champions. We're trying to showcase what we're doing in our classes to other faculty who are not project management affiliated, trying to share the value of the ePortfolio at a larger scale. Talking about, of course, everybody wants to talk about how might a new tool help with assessment. So we talk about assessment, the backside, how doing direct assessment can be a little bit more efficient using the ePortfolio, and of course using student artifacts is, in my opinion, the best artifact for assessment. So I kind of through a couple of different ideas for faculty, making the faculty do it, and I say it because that was a little bit, we had to make ourselves go do it. Having the students do ePortfolios earlier in the program so that when they do it at the end, they're familiar. Having some videos available, and then like I referred to earlier, a little bit of hand-holding and coaching is what our capstone probably first 3 weeks becomes. Being a big cheerleader, helping the students when they're either afraid to start creating the ePortfolio, or if the students are just so overwhelmed at the idea of collecting all that they've done, being a cheerleader often very much helps them. So I will kind of conclude that, and probably pretty close to our session, with, there's no better parting shot from a student when they sit back and say, I didn't know I knew this much. Or equally wonderful is, wow, I didn't really truly understand this discipline until I went through and created my ePortfolio, which both of those statements are really the purpose behind going through the activity of ePortfolio creation. So I thank everybody for coming the last session on today.
You guys win. Winners.
Yay.
All right, thanks Tracy for your time. Thanks for coming in remotely. And if anybody has any questions, you can contact Tracy or myself. We both have a website. I have a QR code up there. You can scan it if you want to. Tracy, we need to get you a QR code. But we both have a website that has our contact information and our portfolios. So you can reach out to us that way. So thank you for attending, and have a good rest of the conference.